I'm Angela Williams.
And I'm Katie Sudano.
And I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse.
And I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse.
Welcome
to our Voice Up podcast.
If you're just tuning in for the first time for our Voice Up podcast, Katie and I are shedding a light on a dark subject of child sexual abuse. We are both survivors, and we've worked really hard to break the cycle and the silence and to share our stories so that hopefully it'll help somebody else. So if you're just tuning in, we ask that you please subscribe to our channel, our YouTube channel.
Like and share.
Like and share, and please share this podcast. And we couldn't be more thrilled today. We've been promising that you get to meet our husbands. So, Katie, do you want to introduce our special guest today?
We finally got him here. This is my husband, Dr. Nick Sudano. We have been married for almost 26 years. This month will be 26 years married.
Glorious years.
And I am just so grateful for this man. He's been my rock. He's been my foundation. And I think the biggest overarching thing I can say about you is you're the first person and probably one of the few people that literally walks the walk and talks the talk. I mean, if he tells you he's going to do it, he will do it. He's always kept his promises. He's been faithful, loyal, and just a great partner to have. So on that note, that's a hint. You better be nice.
Got any tissues?
Aw, that did bring tears to our eyes.
So tell our viewers, a little bit about you first and then how we met. And the whole point of having you on the podcast is to kind of shed light on how it is living, dealing, surviving with a survivor of child sexual abuse.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I'm honored to be here today. This is something that I've been so proud of you ladies for doing, that just being here and the strength you have to be able to really shed light on a subject that's as taboo in a way as this. So it's just, I applaud you for that. Interesting story. So when Katie and I first met, you want me to get into that?
Yeah, you go for it.
All right. So when we first met, I was doing health screenings, and one of my friends couldn't be at, I think it was the Atlanta Merchandise Mart. And so they asked me to be there that day, and she wasn't supposed to be there that day, but she ended up going because her mom was like, oh, you're going to see Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and all these gurus of inspiration and so on. So I'm like, all right, I'll go. And like I said, my friend couldn't be there, so I was filling in. And I literally dropped my keys, put them down at the table when I opened up the booth, and she's coming by. And she's walking by with her mom, and I'm like, wow, look at these two beautiful women. And so the funny thing is I end up screening her, and she's like, I don't go to chiropractors. I've had a bad experience with chiropractors.
I was studying to be in medicine, so of course
I know. I was taboo. And so I was like, all right, well, what kind of problem did you have? And she was like, he wasn't professional and so on. And I was like, all right, well, I'm sorry to hear that. We're not all like that. So I start checking her spine, and I start locating problems.
We're not all that. Will you date me?
No, I didn't get to that yet. And who called who first?
True.
So, just checked her spine out, found problems that she was like, how did you find that? And this and that. And she had gymnastics injuries and so on. And so next thing you know, she's pulling out the little photo album in her purse, and it's got pictures of her son in it. And I'm thinking, okay.
I did that on purpose.
I know. You were just trying to screen me. That's what you were trying to do. See
well,
if I
and
would
to
stick
warn
around.
you, I'm a mom, and I have a kid, and I've got baggage. So don't get too close.
And so next thing you know, she came in as a patient, and then called a few days later. She comes in for her new patient report, and she's able to go out afterwards. So we were like, hey, let's go grab dinner. And next thing you know,
with my mom
and
my
son,
child.
Yeah, who threw pasta.
That was your first date?
That was
kind
of
the first
a first
date.
I don't know if it was
we
a
were
date.
at one of those Italian, franchise basically. I think it was Macaroni Grill or
what?
Mozzarellas. It was mozzarellas. Anyway, so next thing I know, Andre, our son, or her son at the time, is like twirling pasta, and the pasta comes flying at me, and it like literally lands all over my shirt, and I'm like, control your kid. So anyway, but we're here together 27 years later, more than that, I mean, almost 28, and actually more in love than ever before. ever before.
That is a beautiful love story. And for our viewers, especially those that have suffered child sexual abuse, relationships are one of the toughest things in our lives.
Yeah.
Trusting people are one of the toughest things in our lives.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted to have you on, Nick, to really dive deep. And we don't have a lot of time, but we're going to dive deep into that, how her sexual abuse impacted your marriage, how it impacted your relationship, how it impacted her as a wife, her as a partner, her as a friend, and how you can sit here today, because the divorce statistics, the last one I looked at was like 65% of marriages end in divorce. So how were you able to overcome, and how are you able to grow that love? And I think that that's such an important topic to cover, because we push people away. We have walls up. So we want to know from a really good, wonderful man how you tore those walls down and how you won her heart for life.
So I would have to say, probably, first and foremost, for anybody out there, I knew her heart. That was probably the biggest thing. When you know the heart of someone, get the tissues out, is to know the heart of the person and to know that she was genuinely a good person. That anything she was throwing at me, and I got thrown a lot of stuff, a lot of hateful things, a lot of angry things, throwing things, smashing things, because all of a sudden a trigger would happen. We'd be watching a movie, and all of a sudden she would see a dad in the movie, or she would see a child, and next thing I know, she flipped a switch. So knowing her heart was probably the biggest thing, and knowing that she was going to put up walls, and that it was out of pain. And we have a saying between each other that hurt people, and we call them pips, a person in pain. And so there's pips everywhere, and unfortunately you might not know who they are. But I knew she was in pain, I knew she was hurting, and I knew her heart was genuine. And what I had to do, a story I kind of tell my kids, kind of goes like this. So there's this battleship going down the coastline, and it sees off into the distance something else. And the battleship radios ahead, it says, "This is the battleship Lexington. You need to turn 10 degrees starboard." And a signal comes back and it says, "No, you need to turn 10 degrees port." And the person says, "I don't know who you're dealing with. This is Admiral Smith of the USS Lexington. We can blow you out of the water. You turn 10 degrees starboard." And the signal comes back and says, "We're the Lighthouse. You turn 10 degrees port." And I tell that to my kids because it's so important for them to be strong and to not waver with the winds and the waves and so on. So I always use the lighthouse analogy. And I use it with her, and I use it with the kids, and I say, be the lighthouse. And I had to be her lighthouse.
I need a tissue too.
Right? So I had to be the strength that she didn't have at the time. And that's the way I always looked at it. There was always something coming at me. There was a comment or a ring being thrown back, or maybe even this was a mistake, this marriage and the whole thing. And I knew she didn't mean it. And I had to be strong enough to know that. And I literally had to picture myself as the lighthouse, that no matter what she threw at me, I wasn't going to waver, because she needed that. She needed the person she knew wasn't going to leave her, because she was just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
I always
That's what
said
she always
that.
said.
Yep.
And so knowing that, she was waiting for me to leave like everybody else did. She had betrayal. She had lies. She dealt with her father, lied, would tell her things, promise her things, then send her away to be with her mom. Her mom would send her back with her dad. So there was a lot of abandonment issues, a lot of betrayal,
A lot of disappointment.
lack of trust, disappointment. You're not going to keep your word like everybody else didn't keep their word. And I knew this was coming. And so, like I said, I literally just had to be that lighthouse for her, knowing that this is your rock, you can lean on it, and it's not going anywhere. And that was really the biggest thing.
It was tough because as he was being this lighthouse, we're all mushy-gushy crying about it now. But in the moment, you being the lighthouse for me meant you would tell me no, and I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
You would, be a little aggressive in your tone, which is what I needed. And
I'm from New York.
That's true. I wasn't used to that. I was used to people
Yeah.
being nice in my face and
Or
stabbing me
chameleons
back,
and-
or being chameleons. And I, of course, when you're in it, you don't realize that you need the structure, you need the discipline, you need the foundation to be strong and solid. And that, living through that strong and solidness, I felt like you were mean and harsh.
Oh, yeah.
And
she would tell the kids that, Dad's being this
I
or
would.
Dad's being that. And sometimes she
I
would
know,
try
because
to
I didn't
turn them
understand
on
it.
me because she wanted their support.
but not on purpose. Like, I
No,
wasn't
no.
consciously doing
No, I know. I didn't ever look at you like you were this vindictive person. No, I looked at you like you wanted their support for what your belief was. And
I just didn't understand it at the time.
Right.
I think, if anything, looking back, I don't regret anything, and I appreciate everything. You were there for me and supportive. But I think that for listeners, if you're going to be the Lighthouse, communicating a little more of why you're being the Lighthouse would
but
have
in
been
a lot of
helpful, I
times
think, for
you
me.
weren't. You had a
I
look in
wasn't
your face.
receptive.
You
Yeah, I
weren't
know.
receptive.
Not at
I
the
would
time.
talk to her and say, "Listen, let's talk about this." And she had already had the walls up so thick and
Mm-hmm.
so high that you couldn't talk to her. And I learned pretty quickly that, all right, I'll just walk away then, because it's going to end up worse.
But then
And
walking
then
away
walking
for
away
me was
abandonment.
abandonment.
Yeah,
So
so
it
it was
was
like this
like,
catch-22. But what I always had to do, and I never looked at it like I have to be right or who's right. It was never that. It was always what's right.
What's right?
What's the right thing to do here? What would God do? What would God want me to do? What would Jesus do? Whatever the thought was, it was always what's the right thing? Not I'm right, you're wrong, get over it, you're just being a little baby.
But that's what
It
I
was
heard.
Never.
I have a question. So,
Yeah.
when did you know the severity of Katie's abuse in your relationship?
You know-
Before you married her? After?
No, so when I finally figured out the severity, it was interesting because I knew all the stories. I knew all the occurrences, all the events. But it wasn't until she put it together in her book that I saw it
Wow.
chronologically. And when it was chronologic, it was like, when did you ever have a break? When was there ever a peaceful or a good time or a time where you felt like somebody had your back?
Or you felt safe?
Yeah.
I never had a
Yeah.
time or a moment that I ever felt safe
Yeah.
in my entire childhood. Not a
Yeah.
day.
Yeah,
and
and I
hers went
think-
on for 10 years.
And I don't,
and I know
I think
yours
he
went on
knew
for a
the
while.
stories, but when you're telling a story, sometimes they're
Fragmented.
They're fragmented. That's
but
a
when
great
you
way
put
to
it
put it.
out and written in a format
linear.
like that, linear.
Yeah,
I
it was
think
like
that when-
chronologically by year. I'm like, when did you finally have a break here?
I think that's when you felt and understood the heaviness of a little girl trying to navigate
Yeah.
this big world. The
Yeah, and
way
in
I
your
had
book
to.
too, I like to say you started to, when you first wrote your book, it was the bones. And then when you wrote it afterwards and really started to put, I say massage it, maybe that's not a best word to use in writing a book, but I started seeing where she was putting in the way you'd feel. Like, oh, okay, I walked into the room and I could smell this and the light shone this way and the person, there was this. Then I all of a sudden got it, because that wasn't really described when she would tell me the stories in general. It was just like, okay, this happened at the beach when I was 15 or 16 years
But
old.
I was pretty upfront with you with my
Oh,
abuse
you were,
from,
but
from the
not that
beginning.
descriptive.
Yeah.
In the book, it got a lot more descriptive.
Well, it got
and it was
emotion attached to it. Emotion attached to it, and I think as survivors, and our survivors that are listening can probably agree. You almost don't want to tell the extent of the abuse because you don't want to traumatize the other person.
Yeah.
It's like it's so horrific, it's so horrible. I
You're
know how
protecting
much you
them,
love.
in a
You're
way.
protecting
Yeah.
them. I know how much you love Katie, and had you heard that, it would hurt your heart.
Oh,
to hear.
I would
Well, plus we still carry shame.
want to do
You know,
bad
we
things
don't-
to the person.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would want to hurt them badly.
So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit, and this is going to really speak to our viewers. Tell us about how it impacted your intimacy.
Well, at first, she went through different stages with that. So intimacy at first was maybe like,
Because I'm a chameleon. Not
Yeah.
anymore, but I was.
yeah.
So I could fake it till I make it for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's why you were confused about.
Yeah,
the
there were
intimacy.
times early on in the beginning where everything was great. It was the passion and the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, it's like, where'd that go? And it may be months or weeks or so on, and you're going, okay, what's happened? Do you still want to be in this marriage? Because I'm not feeling it. You know, and I'm real direct, and I'm just like, what are you doing? And so then it would get good again, and then she would feel guilty about something, and next thing you know, she would start to put on weight. And it's not that I didn't then love her, but she felt bad about herself at that point. And I knew that, and I would say, honey, you know, maybe eat this way or that way or whatever. And I know guys aren't supposed to do that, but
Don't
Trying to be helpful.
I'm trying to be helpful, and I'm a doctor, and I deal with nutritional needs all the time, so I'm trying to be helpful.
That made me a little angry.
Yeah. And, you know, it was always like, well, you just want me to look this way or that way. I'm like, no, it's not that. I love you either way. But, and but's not maybe a good word to put in there. I knew she didn't feel good about herself. And as long as she didn't feel good about herself, it affected everything. And then there were times when I used to say, you really need to find your purpose. What does God want you to do? Because there were times, you know, if you really want to be honest with, she'd be depressed just laying in bed all the time. Mm-hmm. This one right here, who's as vibrant as anything and has as much to offer the world as anybody, was laying in bed. And it would just break my heart seeing that. And I'd walk into the room and it was like a cave. You know, I'd be like, what's with the cave? Open the windows, you know, get some blinds open. And she'd be sitting there just laying in bed watching TV. And I'm like, you're better than this. You are made for a big purpose. You need to figure out what that is, because right now you're a rudderless ship. I said, you're just spinning around. You need to get a rudder on that and figure out what your purpose was. I don't have a purpose. You have your purpose. You figured out yours early. I know. But you know what your passion is.
Such a victim mentality.
Yeah, right back to victim. You know, just. And so it became, all right, then I have to get her out of that and get her onto whatever her purpose and plan is. And I didn't look at it like, well, you just need to listen to me because, you know, I'm a doctor and I'm your husband and you just obey. No, it's because God put me in her life, in her place, to be her mirror, to be her rock, to be her lighthouse, to be the person that's her sounding board that isn't going to put up with the victim stuff.
Sounds like it was a depression, too.
Oh, it
Sounds
was.
Like it was a fairly dark depression.
And I'm like, stop with the victim mentality. I mean, I was like really straight up with her.
It was hard. It was hard to hear, but I needed it.
Then you just flipped and you got really good. It's like all of a sudden she realized, I think, he's not leaving. I've thrown everything at him, and he's not going anywhere.
Kitchen sink, and you're still there.
Literally, plates from the kitchen, smashed on the floor, thrown at the door. I had to get my BMW out of the garage so fast one time because she threw a shelf at it.
Oh, my goodness.
She had a shelf on her head, and she heaves it at
because I thought you loved the BMW more than you loved me. That's how I felt.
I love not having to pay for dents in it to get the paint repaired.
This is love.
I'm not.
This is love. This
is real life.
This is real life.
Plus, this is through 28 years. It's not like I must have,
well, I want to just really go back, and we will have this in the link, but When Truth Gives Strength to Wings, and that's Katie's book. And if you've not read her book, it's up here behind Nick. Truth Gives Strength to Wings. It is a page turner. Yeah. It's going to be a movie one day. I just know it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I fell in love with you more, Nick, in the book. I did. I read.
Did you like my name at the end?
Yes.
You know where that came from?
Yeah, you got to share that story.
That's funny. So at the end, I was like, am I going to be in this book at all? And you're like, well, you're at the very end. I'm like, okay, because she kind of meets me at the end. And I said, okay, in this book, I want to be named Maximus.
Mm-hmm. Because of the movie, you love that
because I love Gladiator, and plus I'm Italian. I'm like, I want to be Maximus. So she writes in the books, Dr. Max Imus. So I'm Dr. Imus.
Just split it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be funny, poke some fun at you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you are such an inspiration and such a great husband and a great father and a great doctor in our community. And I know that it's not been easy. I know it's been challenging, but it's like that gives us such strength that it makes us stronger as we go. Can you unpack a little bit for the husbands out there that are married to a survivor that is at their wits' end? They don't know what to do. They love the woman. They want to be the rock, but they just don't know what to do. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, you kind of, and I don't do this to do this, but it's like you have to be confident with yourself. If you're not, and they tell you something, it sticks to you. I used to always tell my son, something won't hurt your feelings unless you believe part of it or believe it. So if somebody calls you something, if you don't believe it, it's going to be like Superman. It just bounces right off, But if you believe it or it hurts you, it's because you believed part of it. So I would say to the husbands out there to, first of all, make sure you're confident with yourself, because you're going to take a barrage of hits. I mean, fire's coming in from all different angles sometimes. And you have to know that, okay, this person is just hurting. They're just in pain. They've been betrayed. They've been abandoned. They've been lied to. And you're just the next one. And so to know that and say, okay, no, this person, I'd have to say this. This is probably one of the best ways I could explain it. You have to know the outcome.
Okay.
You have to know the outcome. Even though you mentioned it maybe twice, the D word never came out of my mouth. The word divorce was never going to happen. And so she would throw it out on occasion. And I was like, nope, not receiving that. And so knowing that, okay, if you're both going to here, that's the end result. 25 years together, 50 years together, retirement together, whatever it may be. You may be doing this in some different directions, but you always have to end up in the same spot. And even if you are going in different directions, catch that early, because you don't need to be out here. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, you both have separate lives. Because that can happen. You can have a guy that's like, what, the hell with this, I'm out of here. I'm just going to, find something on the side, or I'm just going to, take up hobby. I'm going to golf, whatever it is, whatever that mistress is going to be. And to recognize that, okay, no, I have to be there for her or be there for him, either way. And stay with that person that even though they may veer off this way, we're going this way, but I'm bringing you as the lighthouse back to here. And even though you might go off, no, you're coming back this way. And to be the strength of them. But like I said, you have to also have that own strength in yourself, because if you're not, you're going to get chewed up and spit out.
So we all have stuff in our past. We all have childhood trauma of some type. I haven't really ever met anyone that's had a perfect childhood, perfect raise, perfect parents. So is there anything in your childhood that maybe got triggered by Katie's abuse that you've gone through?
Nothing like that. She talks about my dad, and my dad was a Marine. I have a family of Marines, so I tend to be more military type. People are like, are you a police officer or special forces or something? I'm like, no, I'm just raised that way. And so
just have a shaved head.
Yeah, that was because I had, my follicles were abandoning me. So what I had to, nothing triggered me as far as sexual abuse. I never had that. I don't even know what that was when I was growing up a long time ago. But my father was the type that he was sarcastic, and him and I butted heads all the time. And so if anything, I saw that more verbal abuse. I saw him taking, shots at me or jabs at me.
At your mom, too.
My mom, yeah. He would make comments to my mom, and it was like, okay, what do you got, your beer muscles on right now? And next thing you know, we're like this. My mom was like, because I wouldn't allow that. I didn't like him picking on my mom. And so, but it was his own insecurities. Looking back at it now, somebody who's insecure is always going to come after someone else and try to take them down, not just to make them higher. So if one of my kids comes home and says something, I'm like, honey, that's an insecurity. They wouldn't be, if you're secure with someone, you build them up. If you're insecure with someone, you're going to tear them down, because it makes you feel better about yourself. And so I'm always like, listen, if somebody's coming at you for something, it's because they're insecure about it. You could see it right away. They're maybe more loud, more look at me, more boisterous, whatever it may be. It's an insecurity. So what happened in your life that you're feeling like you need to, man up like that?
But I think, to answer your question too, from my point of view, his father was also a raging alcoholic, functioning alcoholic. Yeah. And I think that instead of making things for him, like traumatizing him, it actually encouraged him to do better and do things differently. That's probably why you don't drink as much. Not that you're afraid to become. I barely ever drink. Right, but I mean, you've seen what that does in families and how it divides and separates. So if anything, it's been positive for him.
I heard something great recently, is that love seeks to understand and not be understood. And I think that's pretty powerful, and I can see that acting out in your marriage. Tell us what part faith plays in your marriage, has played in your marriage.
Everything. It's everything. And I'm always, I wasn't always that faith-based. I mean, when I graduated from chiropractic college, I was spiritual, but I wasn't faith-based. I was raised in a Catholic church. I have an aunt that's a nun in Italy, an uncle that's a monk in Italy, another uncle that was a Roman Catholic priest in Italy who knew Pope John Paul. So I was in. I had the connections. I was like, okay, I'm going.
You're going to heaven.
But looking back, I probably really wasn't, because back then it was just, that was what you do on a Sunday. You sit, stand, kneel, sit, stand, kneel. Sorry, all you Catholics out there. I don't mean to put anybody down, but there was not the faith. So after I got out of school, that's when I said, okay, if I'm in this profession where I believe that the power that made the body heals the body, I just move the bone, God does the healing, I better get closer to God. So I started going. In fact, it was interesting. One of my Jewish friends said, hey, you need to go to see Andy Stanley. And I'm like, really? Who is this guy? And we went to a warehouse, and it was, where's the cross? It's, stuff on TV and screens, and this is a warehouse. This is not a church, But it got me going to more of a faith-based church. Now, fast forward, I was on the host team there for almost 20 years, really helping out and volunteering. Our kids were raised in the church. Katie was brought to the church, although there were many times where she was like, I'm not going anymore. These people are hypocrites. I'm out of here. And she'd leave and not show up for months, or we need to find a new church. I'm out of this church. And so it was on and off there for a while, but now we're stronger than ever in that I said, listen, I'm reading the Bible every morning. You need to be reading it with me. And so every morning at 7:15, 7:30, we start to read the Bible from like 7:30 or 7:15 to like 8 o'clock or so.
You know what's weird about that whole thing, reading the Bible?
From the beginning, Genesis
well, first of all,
on.
I was brought up where if you earmark, highlight, or write in your Bible, that's blasphemous. You don't touch the Bible. That's like you put an altar with candles and you leave it there. No touchy.
Yeah.
And so, our daughter actually, who's very involved in Bible reading and very biblical, very Jesus following.
Mine's all highlighted too.
Yeah, with him too. I honestly never, every time I would pick up the Bible to read it, I wouldn't understand it. It was like mumbo, like I understand the words, but I'm like, I don't get what he's saying. What are these parables? I don't understand. And it would frustrate me. And I don't know what it was or how it happened, but you said we were reading the Bible every morning. I'd like you to read it with me. And I'm like, all right, I don't understand it, but why not? Let's just do it. I love our one-on-one time. I love our coffee time. And we started reading it. And I'm not kidding you. I would read it, and I'm like, oh, my goodness, I understand it. Yeah. Like, what is that? This is just became so clear to me. Yeah. And not only that, but it was like I understood what people said. It was the living thing. And that, I think, has 100,000% brought us even closer. Yeah. We pray together all the time, which before, honestly, I thought that was weird. Mm. Like, I always prayed by myself. Praying with another person, my husband or our children, you do at dinner, and maybe before you go to bed, quickly, protect my children. Good night, love you, God. That was it.
Yeah, so faith plays a huge part, because you start to realize that God has a purpose and plan for everybody. And the things you go through, I always say, to get to the top of the mountain, you have to go through that valley first. And the highest mountains have the deepest valleys.
Amen.
And so you're going to go through stuff. And even in Psalms, it talks about, as I walk through the shadow of the valley of death. It doesn't say you stay in it. It's you're walking through it. And to me, it's always like, okay, I want God to go through it with me, not necessarily get me out of it, because I'm learning something. I might not see it at the time, but I'm learning. And so I look at that now and say, okay, if her and I are going through something, or the enemy, one big thing now, if anything has gotten us closer in faith too, it's realizing just how devious and how much the enemy lies. You get a thought into your head, next thing you know, it's like, where was she? Why didn't she answer her text? So now right away, because the enemy would put that right in my head.
I was at my therapy.
I was already running through scenarios in my head of arguments we were going to have. And I'm like, what am I doing?
I went to therapy. This was like a month ago, and we're really close. And so after therapy, I just decided to stay there for, a couple hours, actually. This guy is like, what are you doing with her? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
My husband's a worry ward. He would have me at a hospital somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, as we'll have to have you, Nick back to talk more
anytime.
because this is a deep subject, and I know that our viewers have so.
I got more on you too.
Yeah. He was tame. He was very tame.
Yeah, it was tame. Thank
So
you.
we love to end our shows with a voice of inspiration for our viewers. So can you speak into that camera and just
Sure.
talk to something that really is meaningful
Get my
to
tissue
you,
out here.
touches your heart, and I know will bless them.
Yeah, it's just really, first of all, know the person's heart. Know they've been through pain. Know that they need that rock. And know that they're trying to push you away because they know that the person who they love the most is probably going to hurt them the most. So that needs to be you, and you're probably going to get pushed and tested. But be the rock, be the lighthouse for them, so that way they know they've always got you there in their corner to have their back, and know that no matter what, you're always going to be there, and that God put you in their lives for a reason. So.
Oh, that's awesome,
Thank
Nick.
you.
And thank you for allowing Katie to be my partner and all your support and love and passion. And we're just very grateful to you and to my husband.
I'm
and,
glad to.
So I'm Angela Williams.
And I'm Katie Sudano.
We thank you for joining us on the Voice Up
Thank you.
podcast. Please share, and we thank Mesmerize Media for making this possible.
Thank you.